Ever had a moment when you knew everything was about to change, but you couldn't turn back? That night, when Frank knocked on my door, I never expected things to spiral into the life-altering conversation we shared. He was just the neighbor's son, after all. But when I opened the door, I let in more than just a man. I let in a shift in my reality. I had no idea that the simple act of being there for him would take us both to a place we never saw coming. This is a story of connection, unexpected revelations, and the subtle power of two people who trusted each other enough to be vulnerable. From a quiet neighborhood to a moment that would change everything, let me take you on a journey you won't forget. Where are you watching us from? Drop your city in the comments and let's dive into this unforgettable night. It was nearly 11 p.m. when I first heard the knock. At that hour, the world outside was quiet, the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're the only person left in existence. My house was dimly lit, and I was just finishing up with the dishes, my mind wandering over the simple pleasures of my evening. A book I was reading, the gentle hum of the radio playing in the background. It was one of those rare, peaceful nights that made me feel like I had everything in place. Then the knock. It was urgent but soft, a sound that broke through the serenity of my routine. I glanced at the clock, wondering who could possibly need something at this hour. As I made my way to the door, I wondered if maybe one of the neighbors needed something, or if perhaps a family emergency had occurred. I opened the door, and there he stood, Frank, my neighbor's son. Frank had always been a quiet guy, the kind of person who kept to himself. I'd seen him around over the years, watching him grow from a shy teenager into the man standing before me now. Frank had never been the one to visit, so his presence at my doorstep was unexpected, to say the least. His face was a mixture of exhaustion and something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface. He looked older than his 35 years, like the weight of something heavy had settled on his shoulders. His clothes were casual, a worn-out shirt and jeans, his hair a bit disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it, trying to make sense of whatever was on his mind. "Deborah," he started, his voice a little shaky, though he tried to mask it. I need to talk." It wasn't just a casual request, I could tell. There was something in his eyes, a pleading look that hinted at a vulnerability I hadn't seen in him before. And though I'd never really been one to pry, something about the way he said it made me feel like I couldn't say no. I stepped aside, silently motioning for him to come in. "Come on in, Frank. What's going on?" As he walked in, I noticed the subtle tremble in his movements, the way his body seemed almost reluctant to take up space in my home, as though he wasn't used to being here. I couldn't help but feel a little concerned. "Are you okay?" I asked, leading him into the living room and offering him a seat. My mind was racing with possibilities. Maybe it was about his parents, or something had happened with his job. I wasn't sure, but I knew there was more to this than he was letting on. Frank sat down, his eyes darting around the room, avoiding my gaze. He fidgeted with his hands, clearly wrestling with something inside him. There was a moment of silence between us, heavy with unspoken words, and I knew, whatever was coming, it was important. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he spoke. "I don't know who else to turn to," he said quietly. "My family? They don't understand. I don't think they ever will." I felt a knot form in my stomach. The weight of his words sank in. This wasn't just a casual chat. This was something far more serious. "Frank, you know you can talk to me. What's going on?" For a moment, Frank hesitated, and I could see the internal battle he was fighting. But then, with a deep breath, he began to speak. "You ever feel like you don't belong?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Like everyone around you is just playing their part, and you're the only one who sees the cracks. I don't know, Deborah. I feel so alone sometimes. I've been trying to keep it together, but lately everything's falling apart." It was the first time I'd heard him express anything like this, and it made my heart ache. Frank had always been so reserved, keeping to himself, always polite but distant. To hear him speak like this, it struck me in a way I hadn't expected. "Life can be tough," I said softly, my own voice filled with empathy. "But you're not alone, Frank. You've got people who care about you. Your parents, your friends." "No, you don't get it," he interrupted, shaking his head. "They don't understand. They're all just focused on their own lives. They don't see me." "Not really. I've been carrying this weight for so long, and I'm not sure how much longer I can keep pretending everything's fine." I couldn't help but feel a wave of sadness wash over me. This was not the Frank I thought I knew. He was a man drowning in his own silence, too afraid to ask for help, and too proud to admit he needed it. And as much as I wanted to push him to open up, I knew I couldn't force it. Instead, I simply sat beside him, offering him the space he needed. "You don't have to pretend with me, Frank. You can talk to me. Whatever it is, I'm here." There was another long pause, and I could feel the tension between us. The air in the room was thick with everything he wasn't saying. And then, as if a dam had finally broken, he spoke again. "I'm scared, Deborah," he said, his voice cracking. "Scared that if I keep going like this, I'll lose everything. I've already lost so much. I don't know what's left for me." The vulnerability in his voice struck me like a wave, and my heart swelled with a mix of compassion and something deeper, a realization that this moment was more than just a man confiding in a neighbor. It was a pivotal moment in both of our lives, a moment where we were both reaching out for something, and it felt right. I placed a hand on his shoulder, offering him a silent reassurance. "You won't lose everything, Frank, but you have to let someone in. Don't carry it alone." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. It was clear he didn't know what to do with the weight of this conversation. But for the first time, I saw a flicker of hope in his gaze. As the night stretched on, we spoke, slowly, quietly, about everything that had been weighing on his heart. And in that moment, I realized how much we had both been holding back. But now, for the first time in a long time, we were both being honest. The night carried on, the hum of the outside world replaced by the quiet murmur of our conversation. I could hear the occasional car passing by, but it felt like we were in our own little world, disconnected from the outside noise. Frank's words had loosened something in both of us, and for the first time in ages, I felt connected to someone in a way that wasn't just surface level. I sat there, listening intently as he shared more about what was going on inside his head. It wasn't just about feeling misunderstood anymore. It was deeper, more personal, and far more raw than I'd anticipated. Frank had been struggling with his relationships, not just with his family, but with his own identity, his sense of self-worth. He had been carrying this burden for so long that it felt like it had become a part of him, a weight that had been slowly crushing him from the inside. "It's like everyone sees me as this guy who has it all together," Frank said, running his hand through his hair again, his voice tinged with frustration. "I'm the one who always shows up when people need something, always the one they go to when things go wrong. But when I need help, when I need someone to lean on, they all disappear. It's like I'm invisible until they need something from me." I could hear the bitterness in his voice, and it was hard not to empathize. I had known Frank's family for years, and I never would have guessed that he felt like this. He had always been the strong, quiet type, the one who took care of things without asking for anything in return. But now, sitting here with him, I could see how that facade had slowly cracked under the pressure. I reached out, placing my hand gently on his arm. "Frank, I think you're carrying too much for one person. It's okay to ask for help, you know. You're not meant to do it all on your own." He glanced at me, his face softening for just a moment, but there was still a guardedness in his eyes, like he wasn't quite ready to let go of that shield he built around himself. He seemed torn, caught between wanting to be strong and wanting to break free from the walls he had built. "I've tried asking for help," he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "But people just don't. They don't get it. They don't understand how much it hurts to feel so alone, even when you're surrounded by people. It's like I'm just playing a part in their lives, and it doesn't matter what happens to me. They just need me to be the guy who has it all figured out." I could see the exhaustion in his face now, the weight of his struggles more evident with every word he spoke, and something in me shifted. I wanted to do more for him than just offer words of comfort. I wanted to take away the pain he was carrying, but I knew that wasn't something I could do, not on my own. All I could do was offer him a space where he didn't have to pretend anymore, where he could let his guard down and be himself. "It doesn't have to be like that," I said softly, my voice steady. "You don't have to play that part for anyone. Not for me. Not for your family. Not for anyone. You're allowed to be human, Frank. You're allowed to feel, to break, to ask for help." He stared at me for a moment, as if weighing my words, trying to figure out if he could trust them. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, a vulnerability he wasn't used to showing. But then, like a wall coming back up, his expression hardened slightly. "I don't know if I can just let go of it all," he admitted, his tone almost apologetic. "I've spent so many years trying to keep it together, trying to make sure everyone else is okay. It's hard to just stop." "I get that," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "But at some point, you have to stop pretending, Frank. You've done more than enough for everyone else. It's your turn now. You deserve to have someone in your corner, too. And you have that with me." There was a long pause. I wasn't sure if my words were sinking in or if he was still too wrapped up in his own turmoil to let them take hold. But then, after a beat, Frank's gaze softened, and he let out a heavy sigh, his shoulders slumping slightly, like the weight of the world had just been lifted a fraction. "I'm sorry," he said, almost apologetically. "I didn't mean to unload all of this on you. I know it's probably a lot to take in." I shook my head, offering him a small smile. "You don't have to apologize, Frank. You're not burdening me. It's okay to talk about it. I'm here for you, remember?" There was a flicker of gratitude in his eyes, a small but significant shift. For the first time that night, he seemed to let go of the wall he had built around himself. He sat back in the chair, running his hand over his face in a moment of exhaustion, but there was a sense of relief in his posture now, like he had finally exhaled after holding his breath for far too long. "I don't even know where to start, Deborah," he said, his voice quieter now, more introspective. I don't know how to fix everything, how to make it all feel right again." I leaned forward, trying to offer him some grounding, some reassurance. "You don't have to fix it all right now, Frank. You just have to start by taking it one step at a time. One conversation, one moment of honesty at a time. You don't have to have everything figured out, and you don't have to do it alone." He nodded, the weight in his expression beginning to shift toward something more hopeful, more accepting. It wasn't much, but it was progress. And in that moment, I knew that whatever happened next, Frank was no longer alone in his struggle. The room was quiet again, but this time it felt different. There was a sense of peace between us, an understanding that hadn't been there before. Frank wasn't just my neighbor's son anymore. He wasn't the guy who lived down the street and kept to himself. In that moment, he was someone I could connect with on a deeper level. And that bond, fragile as it was, felt like something worth protecting. "Thanks," he said after a moment, breaking the silence. "For listening. For not judging me." I smiled, a soft, sincere smile. "You don't need to thank me. We all need someone to talk to. Just remember, you're not in this alone." And as Frank sat there, the weight of his burdens a little lighter, I realized something. Sometimes the hardest part isn't opening up, it's letting someone else in. But once you do, the possibility of healing becomes a little more real, a little more attainable. And tonight, I had witnessed that shift in Frank, and maybe, just maybe, I had experienced it in myself too. The hours had drifted by, and yet neither of us felt the urgency to rush the conversation. The night was ours in a way, a quiet space for reflection and connection that we hadn't expected but had desperately needed. By the time the clock had struck 2:00 a.m., the world outside felt like a distant memory. There was only Frank and I, two souls who had unknowingly crossed paths in ways that would never be the same. Frank shifted in his chair, a slight sigh escaping him. He looked tired, but there was something else in his eyes now, a softening of sorts, a vulnerability he hadn't allowed himself to show before. I could see the change in him, even in the smallest ways. His posture had softened, his hands no longer fidgeting nervously. There was a kind of quiet acceptance, a realization that things could be different now. "You know," he said, his voice steady but thoughtful, "I don't think I've ever really let myself talk about all of this. Not to anyone. I always figured I'd just deal with it on my own. But it's getting harder to do that. To pretend everything's fine when it's not." I nodded, my heart heavy with empathy. It's okay not to have everything figured out. It's okay to feel like you're struggling. We all go through things that we can't handle alone, Frank. And I think tonight you finally let someone in. And that's a big step. A really big one. He looked at me then, and for a brief moment his eyes held a deep appreciation, a gratitude that went beyond words. It was a look that made everything feel raw and real. I could feel his walls cracking, piece by piece, and as painful as it was, there was something liberating about it. "I never thought I'd end up here, talking to you like this," he admitted with a chuckle, though it was soft and not without a touch of irony. You're not what I expected." I raised an eyebrow, unsure what he meant. "What do you mean?" He shifted uncomfortably, but didn't shy away from the truth in his eyes. "You know, you're not just the neighbor anymore. You're someone I can talk to. Someone who actually listens. I don't know why I've always kept my distance. Maybe it's because I never thought anyone would understand. But you get it." I couldn't help but smile at his words. In that moment, it felt like a mutual understanding had formed between us, a bond that, though unexpected, was meaningful. I had spent years in my own bubble, just like Frank, assuming that no one could understand the complexities of my life. Yet here we were, two people connecting on a level I hadn't anticipated, yet had always longed for. "I get it because I've been there," I said quietly, my voice tinged with honesty. "We all have our own battles, our own struggles. I've had my share of loneliness too, Frank, and sometimes all it takes is one person who's willing to listen, without judgment, to make the difference." He nodded slowly, letting my words sink in. There was something powerful about vulnerability, I realized, when you open up to someone, when you allow them to see you in your most unguarded form. It doesn't just change the other person. It changes you too. And I could see the shift happening in Frank, this quiet evolution that would mark a turning point in his life. I'd always been afraid of how people might see me if they knew everything. Frank admitted, his voice quieter now, almost reverent. If they knew all the things I've been carrying, the mistakes I've made, I didn't want them to look at me differently. You don't have to be ashamed of who you are or what you've been through, I said, my tone firm yet gentle. Those things don't define you. The way you choose to move forward, the way you grow from those experiences, that's what matters. Frank stared at me for a long moment, as if processing my words, as if something inside him was finally making sense. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the pull between staying in the comfort of his old ways and stepping into the unknown, into the person he could become if he allowed himself to let go. "You're right," he finally said, his voice gaining strength. "I've been holding on to all these old ideas about myself, things that don't serve me anymore. And maybe it's time to let go of them. Maybe I need to stop pretending that I've got everything figured out. Maybe I need to just be me." I felt a wave of pride swell in my chest. It wasn't about me, but it was. In some small way, I had helped him see that his worth wasn't tied to his ability to carry the weight of the world alone. His worth was in his humanity, in his willingness to show up, to be vulnerable, and to trust others. "I think that's a good place to start," I said, my voice warm. "Being yourself. The rest will follow." The words hung in the air between us, and I could feel the shift in our dynamic. It was subtle but powerful. Frank wasn't just the neighbor's son anymore. He wasn't just a man with a troubled past. He was a person, someone worthy of connection, someone who deserved to find peace in the world. And maybe, just maybe, we were both beginning that journey right here, in this quiet living room, at this late hour. We sat in silence for a while, letting the weight of the conversation settle. The only sound was the occasional rustle of leaves outside as the wind whispered through the trees. I had no idea where this new chapter for Frank would take him, but I knew that in this moment he wasn't alone anymore. Eventually, Frank stood up, his shoulders straighter, a renewed sense of purpose in his movements. "I think I should get going," he said, but it wasn't rushed, wasn't awkward. It was simply the next step in a process that had started with a knock on the door. "All right," I said, standing up with him. "But Frank, don't hesitate to come back, okay? If you need someone to talk to, I'm here." He gave me a smile, genuine and warm, his eyes reflecting a gratitude I hadn't seen before. "I will, Deborah. I promise." As he turned and walked toward the door, I couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment, knowing that this wasn't just a casual visit anymore. It was a moment of transformation, not just for Frank, but for both of us. Sometimes the most unexpected encounters could lead to the most profound shifts. And as I closed the door behind him, I realized that, despite the quiet of the night, something within me had also shifted. The door between us had opened, and the possibilities ahead were endless. For Frank, for me, for both of us. The world outside hadn't changed, but in that small moment it felt like it had. And that was enough.